I think it was also weirdly the inspiration for the Ents in Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien was so disappointed by the woods of Dunsinane moving, because it was just people holding twigs. And he was like, that's not a wood moving. I'll show you a wood moving.
Rusty Quill presents Enthusiasm. Hello, friends and fans, and welcome to Enthusiasm, the show where we talk about a few of our favourite things. I am your host, Helen Gould, one of the best Rusty Quillers, and today we're talking about Shakespeare. And I am extremely glad to be joined by Grace, Imogen, Johnny, and Maddie. As always, we shall introduce ourselves alphabetically, which means, Grace, you are first up. Can you give us your pronouns and tell us what you do?
Hello, my name's Grace. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a scriptwriter for various different things, and currently for the very exciting Roman Cry Havoc dramedy.
Excellent. So you're properly part of the Rusty Quill family.
Hooray!
Hooray! Next up, Imogen. What are your pronouns and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Imogen. My pronouns are she, her. I currently voice Imogen, the evil ship's computer, on the stellar spin-off compulsory film appreciation, and I am Minnie on the Town Whispers.
I feel like several fans will try and argue with you about whether Imogen is evil or not.
Oh, no, she is. I know what goes on in her head. I know what she really thinks.
But she helped our lovely clone David Seven, and that's what really matters.
Did she?
Yeah, I think so.
Or did she help herself? I can't remember.
The end result is that David is probably a bit happier, which is all we really wanted.
The results justify the means, which is something Imogen says all the time.
Next up, Johnny, what are your pronouns and what do you do?
Well, as the bard once said, hi, I'm Johnny Sims. Do him pronouns. Writer, narrator of the Magnus Archives, and I'm just still kind of bumming around Rusty Towers.
Maddie, what are your pronouns and what do you do?
I'm Maddie. My pronouns are she, her. I am the former lead editor on Stellar Firma and the current director of the actual play podcast Chapter Multiverse.
Yes! It's going to be so much fun. We're going to do some of our first recordings soon.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. Also, it's very funny to me. I just saw my sound waves when I did E, and it's just the smallest, tiniest little noise. But I am indeed very excited.
Yeah.
All right then. The Bard. Old Shakes. Old Big Willie. Let's start off with the easiest possible question, which is, what's your favourite play? Go.
I don't think that's the easiest question.
I know I'm being cruel. Don't worry.
I mean,
I know it's not easy.
It's Macbeth, just because.
It's
I mean, I
obviously
know
Macbeth.
I know it's a really basic answer, but it's Macbeth. It's just an absolute banger. It's got everything. It's got witches. It's got murders. It's got blood. It's got some really cracking duels. It's got, whoever they've got, the star power, leading actor, they get to make, a severed of his head to, hold up at the end. And that's always a treat. It's just the best one, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, seconded. I would say Macbeth is a corker. It's full of guilt and murder and ambition and witches. So, yeah, what else could you ask for?
And ghosts.
I think it was also weirdly the inspiration for the Ents in Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien was so disappointed by the woods of Dunsinane moving, because it was just people holding twigs. And he was like, that's not a wood moving. I'll show you a wood moving.
I love that idea.
Macbeth definitely has the best, I reckon the best soliloquy in any Shakespeare, which is the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow bit. I've actually got a picture of that on my computer wallpaper. It's just a picture of Patrick Stewart looking at his own hand, and that 10-line soliloquy. And sometimes when I think my writing's getting a bit rubbish, I just read that to remind me what really good looks like, just to sort of reset It's sort of like reformatting your brain computer.
I too have that on a poster, and it's
Oh!
a poster. Weirdly, it's like a poster of the Underground at Canary Wharf. And it's the
Wow.
escalators as you go up, which when I was working at Canary Wharf, I used to go every day in this like mad commuter rush and think of those words about, you know, life creeping on this petty pet. I was very happy and it was very cheerful.
Although it's always, that soliloquy is always kind of weird to me because they start it halfway through a sentence.
I mean, Shakespeare does that a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's because it's like it's talking about Lady Macbeth having, you know, yeeted herself, and it's like, oh, she should have died hereafter. There would have been time for, I forget, such a something tomorrow, and so it sort of it flows into, but because it's like a lot of Shakespeare like soliloquies and lines, which is fascinating because they've achieved such like a standalone cultural presence as these monologues, as these soliloquies, or these famous lines, that often, like when you actually go and see them in like a production, like you won't actually necessarily notice when they turn up because they'll be just like flowing through.
Right, like the bit at the end of To Be or Not to Be, where it's just, and soft you now, the fair Ophelia, and it's like, hang on, that's.
It's to be fair, it's not just Shakespeare. Like you get this with a lot of like famous quotes from movies. Like there'll be a way that the culture remembers them as being delivered. And then sometimes you actually go back and watch a really old movie and you're like, oh, that's not how they said it at all.
In the case of this particular one, I think it works amazingly because it's like he's sort of talking about just like life. He's just talking about the thing that's happened, and it's like his entire brain has just been kind of like sent into a cartwheel by this act, and so he kind of jumps from the prosaic to the profound without even bothering to put in a full stop. You know, I think it's like I totally take your point, and he does it all the time, and I think it's, you know, often hilarious. But in this particular case, I think it feels like it's saying something really important about loss.
Yeah, I mean, like to me, that soliloquy always like I love a performance of it that's just completely hollow, that's just like just absolutely burned out. Like, well, I'm super guilt-ridden. My wife's dead, and there's a ghost. There's a bunch of ghosts. That's rubbish.
Yeah, it's all a bit much, isn't it? At that point, poor chap.
Macbeth.
Poor old Macbeth.
It's all a bit much. So, Grace, is Macbeth one of your favourites then, or would you choose something else?
It's not actually. I mean, I do really like it. Obviously, it's, you know, it's like one of the greatest plays by, you know, Shakespeare. But I think I'd probably. Can I have one per category? Or do I have to just pick?
We've got time. I'll give it to you.
All right. Much Ado About Nothing for the comedies. And I'm going to have Henry V, which, just to be clear, massively disapprove of all of the politics, but it's really good. Brilliant speeches. If you ever want to persuade yourself to, I don't know, invade France, that's probably the one to go for.
This podcast does not endorse invading France.
Just standing on the Eurostar platform, muttering to yourself.
Yeah, but I reckon, and then for tragedies, and I think if I had to pick my all-out favourite, it's Hamlet. I know it's like the you know, the single on the album choice, but like it is. I think it's because every single time I see it, it's a completely different play, and I think there's a kind of he's just this amazingly complex bloke, and the dialogue's always the same, but he can be Ben Whishaw as a snotty teenager who you just think, oh, for God's sake, isn't anyone going to do any parenting? Or he can be Kenneth Branagh, this like great statesman, or he can be, and in my opinion, correctly, this like unbelievably, massively intellectually isolated David Tennant playing this like deeply lonely man who's just obviously massively clinically depressed and has just zero support network. I just think, I mean, it's amazing. And it has its flaws, obviously, but I don't think that means it's not perfect. So, for example, it has like literally my favourite ever example of lazy exposition. There's a bit at the
Yes.
There's a bit at the start where one of the guards in scene 1 says to the other one, "Well, as you know, Fortinbras has just invaded Norway," and it's just like, oh, mate, nice one.
I mean, there's a so like for me, Hamlet. It's not my favourite to watch, but it is my favourite to analyse because it is fascinating. Because like the whole point of Hamlet is like to my eyes is that it's like a revenge tragedy protagonist who categorically does not want to be in a revenge tragedy and like knows he's in a revenge tragedy and like is aware that everything like both textually and metatextually is all pushing him towards this. It's like I don't really want to do any of this. There's a which scene, but there's one on the boat which is often cut, but it's like he's literally like, the story wants me to go back and do a bunch of revenge, and I really would like to not do that. And then at the end he's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go and do a bloody revenge then.
I mean, my hot take on Hamlet is that I don't like it at all. And I was really fed up with Hamlet the entire time, and I was just like, shut up. Just kill them or don't.
But this is, I think this is kind of what I actually like about like the lazy exposition and that sort of thing up top, is that it is, because it is written for an audience that absolutely knows how a bloody revenge tragedy is meant to go, who are like watching the Duchess of Malfi and being like, yes, Dance of the Dead, murders. Up top, it's just like, yeah, so this is a revenge tragedy, and they're like, oh yeah, okay. And then Hamlet walks in and is like,
Hamlet walks in and is like, I don't wanna.
Yeah.
See, I would agree with Johnny. I think that the least interesting thing to do with Shakespeare, and it's already interesting, is watch it. I think the most interesting thing to be is be in it, then is to analyse it and like read it, and then is to just watch it. Like, although they're all great, I think that watching it is much less fun than the other two.
I think that's true.
On my own with that opinion, obviously, that's
No,
fine.
I like that. I think that like I've seen a lot of really mediocre Shakespeares that, you know, full snooze fest. And I've seen a couple of really good Shakespeares. There was a production years back at the Globe of The Comedy of Errors. Famously, not a good one.
Famously hilarious. What are you talking about?
No, Comedy of Errors? Yeah, I know. Two sets of twins.
You haven't understood it.
Two sets of twins.
He looks
swapping.
like his servant.
Yeah.
They look like each other. Okay.
Well, the thing is, this was a brilliant production, because what they'd done is they had done it as literally Benny Hill style, sort of, so with chase sequences and swanny whistles, which was really, really funny, and like because it is that very specific sort of like contrived farce. That framing meant that every one of the jokes massively landed.
Yeah, it's essentially Who's On First, just longer. Like, it's the one joke.
And like with Shakespeare, there's so many of the plots that he just completely nicked wholesale from other things, and everyone's just like, he was a genius. But the genius was choosing which things to steal, like David Bowie.
Originality's overrated.
Because I studied Latin at school because I was a nerd, and I was looking at Plautus plays, and there is one about twins and all this kind of thing, and it was just like, yep, this is exactly the same.
But like, at the time, like originality, in inverted commas, wasn't really thought about. It wasn't considered a virtue in a piece. Like, you look at a lot of, I want to say it's Chaucer, which is, you know, 100, 200 years before, but like Chaucer at one point makes up some stories in the Canterbury Tales, and he goes on long explanations of where he heard this story, and like makes up an entire like backstory for him knowing this story to make sure people didn't think he was just making his own stuff up. And so like a lot of that era, like reinterpretation and taking old stories and like putting them out there in new and interesting forms, was what art and creativity was.
And in some ways it still is with the so many franchises that we have.
I mean, I personally, I kind of agree. I think that, like, it's originality is cool, but often the best stuff is taking and mixing and reinterpreting.
Yeah, because you don't live in a vacuum and you are constantly surrounded by inspirations, and to kind of try and pull everything out of your own head is impossible because you are inevitably, no man is an island.
Is that a quote?
It is a quote, but I'm not sure from whom.
It's
Donne,
John
isn't it?
Donne.
Oh!
Ask not for whom the bell tolls.
Maddie, which one's your favourite?
I have to agree with Grace and go with Hamlet as well, because I'm a massive goth baby and I just love being miserable. Yeah, I really relate to the kind of existential angst, and I also love how funny Hamlet the character is and how he's just kind of doing intellectual rings around everyone. And because I was a massive fan of David Tennant's Doctor in Doctor Who growing up as well, I noticed a lot of parallels between the way he played the Doctor and the way he played Hamlet. And this is just complete nerdery, but he just, the sense of, I am so much cleverer than everyone else in this room, but I'm just going to let everyone believe that they're on my level kind of thing, which is very arrogant and not very attractive, but I find very interesting.
Yeah, well, you know what? I blame David Tennant for tricking a whole generation of nerds into thinking Hamlet's not just a big dweeb.
He is.
Big whiner.
I love a dweeb me.
Do you know what? I think that's a good point for which to take a break, and we will be back after this. Hello everyone, this is Helen, the voice of Azu from Rusty Quill Gaming and host of our chat show Enthusiasm. If you haven't heard yet, Rusty Quill has a brand new original audio drama, Thrice Forgotten. Thrice Forgotten is a swashbuckling found family adventure created by Nemo Martin. Alestes likes to keep her head down while she works as a merchant, couriering deliveries and carrying travellers to destinations across the seas. Only, as her travellers gradually become permanent crewmates, she realises her ship has become a floating museum, a laboratory, a vault of repatriated treasures, and a chef's kitchen. After spending most of her life with the understanding that nothing changes, no matter how hard you fight, Alestes is faced with a choice. Will she use her new network of allies to build a safe harbour and potentially a future for her new community, or will she once again put her head down and drown in her sea of excuses? Thrice Forgotten is the latest audio drama from Rusty Quill, creators of multiple award-winning podcasts, including the Magnus Archives and Rusty Quill Gaming. Search for Thrice Forgotten, that's TRICE, wherever you listen to your podcasts, or visit www.rustyquill.com for more information. And welcome back. As usual with these recordings, we started talking about relevant things in the middle of the break. So, Johnny, you played Henry VIII, which is a play I did not know existed.
Yeah, like I was saying, I don't think I've actually really read, because everyone was talking about Richard III, and I'm like, I've never actually read or seen that one. I don't know his histories very well, because the only ones I've encountered are ones that I actually was in, and one of them is I played Henry VIII in Henry VIII, and I remember nothing out my head. I remember the venue very well, because it was a really nice, like, chapel space, and had really nice acoustics when I said whatever the hell I said in Henry VIII.
Bring me another wife.
Yeah, maybe.
I went to watch Henry VIII in Spanish once. I don't speak any Spanish, but the Globe...
Did you learn any during the course of the play?
No, I didn't. I also didn't learn what happens in Henry VIII. The Globe did this really cool thing. It was for, I don't know, some sort of centenary probably, where they did like 40 Shakespeare plays in 40 languages, something like that.
Wow.
Which was really cool. And for reasons that remain obscure to me, I decided that the one I would go and see was Henry VIII, a play I do not know at all, in Spanish, a language I do not speak. But like, which also, yeah, so I got to about, I don't know, halfway through Act 1. And I think I must have got to the end of to the interval, because I'm definitely not the sort of person who has the confidence to walk out in the middle. And I think I was just like, do you know what? I feel like I should be getting something out of this cultural experience, but what I'm getting out of it is that I don't speak Spanish.
I don't know how much more you've got out of it if it was in English, to be honest. Like, what I remember about Henry VIII is being in it and being like, this doesn't mention any of the stuff I know about Henry VIII. Like, like the six wives thing, don't think it really comes up.
Because there's loads of really famous stuff about Henry VIII.
I think if memory serves, and it categorically does not, it's definitely more concerned with his relationships with other dudes and whether he's going to have them murdered or not, and like a lot of like the country politics that hasn't really lingered in the historical imaginings of Henry VIII, rather than like the religious and wifely stuff that people remembered. I think, like I said,
maybe you're making it all up.
I could be making it all up. This is what 12, 13 years on. Yeah, it's all gone.
I wonder if there was some sort of like contemporary political reason why he focused on all of that. So
Well, presumably it was Elizabeth would have been the queen at the time, so probably not lingering on the like.
Yeah, on all the massive...
All the wife murdering of her mum.
The wife situation.
Extra time, multi-wife, yeah.
So when was it set? Was it set when her mum was his wife? Or was it... I don't know why I'm asking you. You've already told me twice.
Write in on a postcard. Maddie, any facts about Henry VIII, the play that you've got stored away?
I half remembered a fact during the break and then quickly did a stealth Google and found out I was right.
Yeah!
Ooh, go on.
So in June 1613, the Globe burned down during a performance of Henry VIII because they were using some cannons as part of the play, and like the sparks ignited on the thatched roof and it burned down.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't it made of wood?
Yeah, so Henry VIII, both a bad play and bad luck for the theatre, I guess.
So how come Macbeth is the one that you're not supposed to say? Why isn't Henry VIII the one you're not meant to mention backstage?
Because in Macbeth, you don't want the theatre to burn down during it.
Yeah, that would ruin it. Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
Thing is, I reckon they're probably just like, look, we've got this play, it's a dud. We all know it's a dud. How are we going to keep the audience until Act 2? I know, live cannons!
Or a bear.
Well, I mean, it was like, to be fair, it was a lot of that. Like, it was a lot of gimmicks, and like one of the things I really, really love about Shakespeare is like you're like, oh, well, you know, the political, obviously, like political context for a lot of his plays is important, but a lot of like, well, I wonder what the reason this one was written. It's like he was getting paid.
Yeah.
My favourite thing about Shakespeare is how much of a sellout he was, and just like absolute shell for like whatever, because he was there to get paid, and I really respect that. One of my favourite things is in Twelfth Night. The character Antonio keeps bringing up that the inn they are staying in is called the Elephant. Like, keeps mentioning it out of the blue for no reason, and like goes on about how like comfortable it is, and don't forget we're staying at the Sign of the Elephant, and like you will never be able to convince me
But it's not product placement.
that there wasn't like a pub or an inn called the Elephant nearby who slipped Shakespeare a few quid to drop it in the play. You'll never be able to convince me that didn't happen.
Amazing.
Yeah, what a legend. I mean, he was like, he was politically super conservative. He like wrote loads of his plays to kind of please whoever the current monarch was, but I think my favourite kind of thing along those lines, I have no idea if this is true, it might be massively apocryphal, is that Hamlet obviously was famously a huge flop because like introspective whining wasn't a thing at the time. And then the next play he wrote was called As You Like It. And it was and it's just this like straight up, ordinary, like, right, here we go, it's a comedy, it's got a funny dog in I expect, that sort of thing. And it is just him being like, right.
Oh yeah,
right,
you like laughing, do you? You like fun marriages.
Fine, you don't want to watch 3 hours
people.
of someone introspecting and agonising. Right, well, I didn't like you either.
One thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that obviously we're still watching his plays today. There've been like a million different adaptations of like almost all of them. And I wonder if anyone has like a favourite adaptation that they've seen, like whether it's like one of the movie versions where it's only lightly based on it, like if 10 Things I Hate About You and stuff like that, or whether it's that Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet one that's so very
Baz
pretty.
Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet is... I always forget his name, but the guy who plays Mercutio is just
He took us
wonderful.
all by storm. We watched that in school.
I saw a really good production of Macbeth, and Johnny, you might have actually been there. It was in Edinburgh in like 2012, and it was by a Polish group that did it with motorcycles and fire and stilt walkers and lopped off the third act. It was so good.
Macbeth.
It was okay. Apologies to people who speak Polish. It was Biuro Podróża, I think, a really famous production, and it was so cool. Outdoors, dark, flames. They burned down like the whole set at the end. It was amazing. Oh, they lop off the final act, so there's no kind of slightly, ooh, no man can harm me who is of woman born, which is a bit, isn't it?
Oh no! But I like the moment where Macduff's like cesarean mother, and Macbeth's like, oh shit.
No. They lop off all of that, so it's just this pure psychological drama because you don't know if the witch's prediction would have come true. And it could still just be chance, like they could just be really, really good at guessing. Like it doesn't have to be magical, Macbeth. I think it's better if it isn't. But yeah, that was an amazing production.
I've just found out who played Mercutio in the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet. His name is Harold Perrineau.
Yes.
He is also Link in The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions.
Yeah.
And he is also in Lost
Michael, yeah.
as Michael Dawson.
I have a big soft spot for, even though there are some aspects of it I'm not so keen on, I have a big soft spot for the Kenneth Branagh Much Ado About Nothing. Because Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson just give off such bisexual energy, and I love it. The bit I'm not so keen on is The Watchmen. I don't think they're that funny. I think Michael Keaton was a weird choice. I had to look it up because I was like, I know it was someone famous who was like the main Watchman, but I cannot remember. Then I was like, oh yeah, Michael Keaton, huh? But also you get Keanu Reeves as the villain in it.
It's Don John.
Yeah, it's Don John, and he's just so emo. He's like,
I am not a man of many words, and yet I thank
I would rather be a canker in a hedge than a rose in his grace. And it's such a weird mix of people. And it's got Denzel Washington in it. It's got the guy from Dead Poets Society in it. And they're just having a lovely time in Italy.
Yeah, they are having a really lovely time, aren't they? It's really, you can really tell as well. Like, it's just like, they're just obviously all really happy. They're just like, we're just going to make a really, really nice film. It's not going to do anything like super, like, interpretatively interesting, but that's actually fine because this is an accessible, lovely adaptation of an accessible, lovely play.
Yeah, for sure.
Love that for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we've obviously already mentioned the David Tennant Hamlet, which is one of my absolute favourites. And I was also lucky enough to see the David Tennant, Catherine Tate Much Ado in the theatre. And that was on the same trip as I went to the Doctor Who experience as well. So there's clearly a running theme for me of Shakespeare, David Tennant, Doctor Who linking. And yeah, just the 80s debauchery of it all was wonderful. And he was like wearing a kind of naval uniform at one point, and there was a bit where they got covered in paint, and yeah, it was just a great laugh. And they did, there's the song in it, the kind of Hey Nonny Nonny song, they did it as like an 80s pop song. So
lovely.
It's very fun.
What do you reckon, Imogen?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Polish motorcycle Macbeth. That was super cool.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed Emma Rice's production at the Globe of Twelfth Night, which was so much fun. That was part of her like Summer of Love a couple of years ago. And that was just utterly joyous, brightly coloured, ridiculous. I cannot remember the name of the actor playing Malvolio, but she was amazing. So much energy and so much heart, because actually Malvolio is this tragic figure. So when she's like, oh, she loves me, like, so tragic and so like genuine in that love, and it makes you think like, well, actually, like, love is the one thing none of us can resist. This is like a real low trick to play on someone. But yeah, it was so much fun.
Aww. One of my favourites was I went to see a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. It was done via 6-foot-tall puppets. Like, as soon as they enter the fairy realm, the puppets appeared.
Oh, wow. So hang on. So were the puppets the humans to make them feel small, or were the puppets the fairies?
I think it was everyone. I think everyone was suddenly a puppet.
Amazing.
There was also a dance element to it as well, and lots of music. It was a very bizarre experience, but I've never forgotten it because they were massive, these things. They had such big heads.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
But yeah, that's one of my faves.
When I was 18, I managed to get on a trip from my mum's school that was going up to see the Macbeth starring Sean Bean.
Oh,
And that was... he was very good at being Macbeth.
I bet he was.
and he dies at the end, which
That's exactly what I was thinking.
You know,
so spoilers for Macbeth there.
I'm not going to put spoiler warnings for Shakespeare plays on.
You've had centuries to catch up, guys.
I find it really, really difficult to pick favourite adaptations because it's always like just like one or two things that are about it that are perfect. Like I imagine it's the moment that we finish this conversation, I'll immediately think of an example. But generally, I can't think of something that's like absolutely everything about it is perfect. It's usually like this particular performance or whatever. So I really, really like it when somebody manages to do a performance of a Shakespeare tragedy where they make the female lead have a personality. I went to see Lenny Henry play Othello years ago. It must have been about a decade ago, I think.
Yeah, it was a while back because I remember being excited.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. The person who played Desdemona, whose name I don't know, just managed to turn this absolute drip of a character into someone charming and funny and young. It was the first time I found a way into that character. The thing about Desdemona is she gets a lot of dialogue. You know, she's not like an Ophelia who's like sort of technically the most important woman in the play, but she's in, a handful of scenes really. Desdemona's in it a lot, but because her whole thing is like, I am perfect, she's like, super, super dull. But the way that they did the performance, they made her playful and like, I remember there's this moment where it's just after Iago started to get into Othello's head and he's sort of standing in the front of the stage doing this really good kind of intense brooding. And Desdemona comes up to see him and her line is, "How is't with you, my lord?" And every time I've seen that performed, it's always been, "Oh, how is't with you, my lord?" But the way that she did it, she kind of like stomps up to him doing an impression of his like serious pose and kind of goes, "Oh, how is't with you, my lord?" And it's just, it's the only time I've believed in that relationship as something that exists, that could actually be a marriage rather than just, like these two people obviously really fancy each other and they got married very quickly and now it's all falling apart. Whereas in this performance, because she was so like real and because she understood him and because she had that kind of nuance, you're like, oh, you're a person. I can totally understand how you could be like one half of a marriage. Yeah, I don't know. I find it very difficult to pick like a particular adaptation, although 10 Things I Hate About You is cracking.
Great film.
Yeah.
We are starting to come towards the end of the episode, and we're going to end on another very simple question. And that question is, why do you think we're still talking about Shakespeare today? Like, we've still got so many opinions after like 400 years. Like, is it just because he wrote so much and so the odds are high that we that will have experienced it? Or is it that he's just that good? Because I don't think he's like extraordinarily good. There are other playwrights that I would say are just as good. I don't know. What do you think? What do you all think?
Well, I think there are 3 reasons.
Ooh.
Firstly, I think it's because we've still got him. So he is massively important to us culturally in a way that means that like so much of what else we've done in terms of our artistic output is sort of a footnote to Shakespeare. That means that for that reason, he remains important because we're still sort of like in his wake. Secondly, I think he is absolutely amazing. And thirdly, I think it's enough of a blueprint that we can make his plays be whatever we need them to be. Like, I think there's a reason that we don't remember Henry VIII. And it's probably because it doesn't do this job. Like, Henry wrote, what was it, 37 or 27 plays? Like, loads, anyway.
37,
of which,
I think.
37, right? Of which we remember about, 15, really? Like, how many can you name without, like, consulting Wikipedia? Like, probably.
I mean,
off the
we
top of
can
your head-
probably name like
Yeah,
basically
no,
all
right,
of them.
but okay, but culturally speaking, there's like 10 that's important, right? And it'll be because I reckon, yeah, massive sweeping statement. I'm going to stand by it. It'll be because those are the ones which are broad enough that they can be whatever we need them to be. So our Shakespeare is not the Shakespeare that Gladstone understood, and he's not the Shakespeare that Pepys understood. He's the one that we need now, and if he stops being versatile enough for us, we'll just ditch him.
That makes a lot of sense. Because there's so many different iterations of the character of Robin Hood throughout the ages, depending on the cultural need at the time. So yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think another thing that I like about Shakespeare that kind of makes him continue to be relevant is in his best works, even if it's a tragedy, there's some comedy in it. And even if it's a comedy, there's some tragedy in it. And that's something that I take very much to heart in all the kind of storytelling I do. It's not going to be as impactful unless you have something to contrast the other side off of. So in Macbeth, there's a funny doorman. and in Much Ado About Nothing, they fake a woman's death.
And the thing is, because the thing about that, though, was they had to, because they had a clown. Because it was all written for the same gang.
Yeah.
And they
that is
had
true.
a couple of clowns. And it's a horrible tragedy, but then I forget his name, but the famous clown who was
It's
Shakespeare's
the Falstaff bloke, isn't it? Yeah.
is so am I making any jokes about bums?
Do you know what? I reckon that's another reason why he's still so popular, actually, is because he was writing for the crowd. If people bored, they'd leave. So obviously, so you're absolutely right. It's got to be funny and it's got to be serious. But also, I thought that's a really interesting point that you made about Robin Hood, Maddie. It sort of links to something that I think it was also you said this right at the start about how Shakespeare basically nicked all of his stories from, ancient oral tradition stories. That's the thing, isn't it? That's sort of what we're doing now. We're just taking very old oral tradition stories. It's just that we happen to be keeping most of the words the same, and we're doing it with interpretation and sort of nuance and cinematography rather than by actually just changing the words. But really what we're doing is the same thing, which is we're turning the same stories that humans have been telling each other for forever into the stories we need them to be now.
I think there's also a shared cultural, everyone has to study Shakespeare at school. We all have to. And I think that's really good because it says that, Shakespeare is not, it's not this elitist thing. It's not something that, only people who are very interested in obscure Jacobean plays might be interested in or love blank verse. It's no, this is for everybody. Everybody is capable of understanding this. If it's made interesting to them, they'll be interested by it. And I guess I really like that about it, because when sometimes people say, oh, why don't we study other Jacobean playwrights? Or, what about Ben Jonson? He was just as good. Or Kit Marlowe or something. It's well, yeah, but there's something really powerful about everybody having the opportunity to study this and it not being out of reach for anybody. It's not for any one particular group of people.
Exactly, and that's really culturally powerful as well, that we've got these kind of touchstones, even if it was hammered into your brain when you were 14 and absolutely furious about it. It does mean that we've got this kind of thing that we do share. Although I would say one of the biggest barriers that I used to find when I was teaching, I used to teach the GCSE resit class, Romeo and Juliet, and the biggest barrier I found, which was the difference between this is going to work and this isn't, was ownership. Because everyone who had got a D the previous year was just this is nothing to do with me. These lessons are nothing to do with me. And so I used to do, I basically didn't go anywhere near the text for the first 3 lessons usually, because I was just I have to persuade you that this is yours, because if it's yours, you won't mind that the language is a little bit difficult to access. But if it isn't, you're not going to go anywhere near it. And if you can just get people to understand that, well, that you're right, Imogen, that it's ours, it's everyone's, it's not for any particular group, it's supposed to be for all of us, then it becomes that, basically. If you know it's for you, you can understand it.
I have a few ideas, and one hot take. I very much agree that a lot of it comes down to how mutable a lot of these plays are. It's the only ones that take place in London are his histories. All the others are set in like, it says, oh, it's Florence, or it's Verona, or it's ancient Rome, but it's not. It's just the stage. So, like, I think there is this. I think Shakespeare's plays do lend themselves to keeping going and not being quite as thoroughly tied to the place and context of their original performance as something like people like Marlowe or Webster or Johnson, which in my experience do tend to be a bit more tied to the where and the when.
I mean, Merchant of Venice, no canals. Like,
yeah,
this is a man. He'd never been to Venice. He'd never been to Italy. It's just like, you're right. It's a place. It's another place.
I also have a pub reckon that it is. I think there is a lot of it that is actually to do with quantity. Just that Shakespeare is a very, very popular playwright of the time that we have loads of. Like most of his contemporaries, we have like a half dozen plays of which there's one good one. And whereas Shakespeare, we've got loads. And a bunch of them are crackers.
We are now well over time, but my fancy has been taken by something that you said earlier, which is I want us, as a final thing before we say goodbye, to try and name as many Shakespeare plays as we can, right?
All right.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Love's Labour's Lost.
Coriolanus.
Two Gentlemen of Verona.
Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello.
Merry Wives of Windsor.
Merchant of Venice.
All's Well That Ends Well.
Much Ado About Nothing.
Measure for Measure.
As You Like It, Twelfth Night.
Romeo and Juliet.
Timon of Athens.
A Winter's Tale.
The Tempest.
Titus Andronicus.
King Lear.
Have we said Comedy of Errors?
Oh, we need to be more systematic about this. Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2.
Henry V.
The Fifth.
Was there a Henry VI? There was probably a Henry VI.
Oh, there must have been. He wouldn't have missed one out, would he?
Did we say Richard III?
Pericles.
Cymbeline. King John.
All right. That's Laurie is making frantic wrap it up motions, so we shall do that. Listener, thank you.
If Laurie wanted us to wrap it up, Laurie should have been writing them down.
We'll stay here all night until Laurie writes them down.
Oh, did anyone say The Taming of the Shrew?
No.
Oh, Merchant of Venice on that.
But we've got to stop. We have to stop. Stop.
I was actually saying Romeo and Juliet.
I said Romeo and
must have.
Juliet.
We are ending this. I regret starting this little game. Listener, you can play this game at home. But
I mean, don't though.
I hope that you have enjoyed listening to us waffle on about Shakespeare. I shall see you in the next episode. But for now, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye. And it's goodbye from all my lovely, lovely guests. Thank you for coming on. Would you all like to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Bye.
Enthusiasm is a podcast distributed by Rusty Quill and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license. It is directed by Helen Gould, produced by Laurie Ann Davis, with executive producers Alexander J. Newell and April Sumner. This episode of Enthusiasm was edited by Maddie Searle and Kathy Ranella. Thanks for listening.